and welcome to the Timeshift, and oh my god, there's no video! I'll explain all in due course, dear listeners, but for now, let me welcome you all to the Timeshift, my sci-fi fun fest. This week, we're reviewing the latest episode of Doctor Who entitled The Ghost Monument. Now, because this video is a review of that episode, if you don't want this episode spoiled for you, it's best to switch this video off to avoid any spoilers. But without further ado, let us all dive headfirst into The Ghost Monument. Woo! Okay, so here we are, dear listeners. It's me, Chris Hall. No video this week. I shall just sum it up quite simply by saying technical difficulties. Also, of course, you may have noticed that we haven't got the new intro yet. Same kind of thing, technical difficulties, and I was sick last week. So, not been a terribly good run of things. I've wasted my entire afternoon, but it doesn't matter, because now we can talk about Doctor Who. Woohoo! So here we are, the first proper episode of the Chris Chibnall era of Doctor Who. No post-regeneration shenanigans or wackiness, it's just the Doctor as she should be. I have to say, I have warmed up to Jodie Whittaker's interpretation of the Doctor quite a bit, but what about you, dear viewer, or dear listener as the case may be? Did you love this week's episode of Doctor Who? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment in the comment section below in whichever website you're watching this on, and I'll try to get back to you, either directly in the comments themselves, or towards the end of next week's video. I do have a comment that I will be discussing later on in this week's video, so keep an eye and an ear out for that. The episode as a whole, I thought that it was, well, enjoyable. That's the best word I can come up to describe it. Enjoyable and competent. I'm not going to say it's the best episode of Doctor Who there has ever been, and it is certainly not, in my opinion, as good as last week's episode. It has quite a few problems with it, which I shall discuss shortly. But certainly what I can say in the episode's favour is that it's still visually stunning. This is an alien world which, whilst I'm sure they just filmed it in Spain or Portugal or somewhere like that, it still felt alien, it still felt weird, even if the big ruin that they ended up finding themselves in towards the midway part of this episode did just look like a water park that had just been left to rack and ruin for a little while, but I won't hold that against the episode itself. I think that the central story was fine for what it was. It's a mad world / rat race in space is fine. My issue with the episode as a whole, because this is the story and production side of things, the performance section is coming later, is that I feel that this week's episode was kind of a little limp. And the reason being is I feel that this episode purely and simply exists just so that we can have the great mystery for this year's season. This year's season, the mystery is the Timeless Child. And of course, the Skren or the Stenza or whatever they're supposed to be are probably going to end up being the big bad guys of this year's series. No thank you. I'm really not in the mood for another series-long mystery. I know that probably makes more sense and works better with this kind of format with Doctor Who, where we're having more interlocked stories. It probably works a lot easier that way, but given what we've had before, I'm still bitchy and I'm still venomous over the whole hybrid thing turning out to be sweet F.A. Aside from that, you take that out of the equation, you get an episode of Doctor Who where it was a lot of walking. It was a lot of walking from point A to point B. Had they picked up the pace a little, we'd been, quite frankly, right back in the Russell T Davies era of the pointing and running at stuff whilst the dun 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 music plays in the background. I know a lot of people like that kind of thing. I know a lot of people like the epic scale of the Russell T Davies era, but for me, I feel that something was lost in that kind of era. The overall mystery that you had for the episodes, for my opinion, wasn't really there. Kinda came back a little bit in the Stephen Moffat era, has been coming back more in the Chris Chibnall era, but this week, there wasn't really much of a mystery. We knew what the Ghost Monument was going to be. It was the TARDIS, and I am glad that they didn't try to make it out to be some kind of great twist. That the Ghost Monument was, in actual fact, the TARDIS! Woo! I never saw that coming. Though, of course, we all did, so it's glad that they kind of head that off at the pass and just say, yeah, we know it's the TARDIS. That's why we have to get to it. That's why we need to get invested with these two side characters who are kind of just there. I get that. I understand it. I'm fine with it. my issue is the fact that aside from that, not much else happened. When you take away the setting up the mystery for the next few weeks, you just get an episode with a lot of walking from point A to point B and nothing much besides it. When you take all, like I say, all the setup out of it, you've got a story which is fun for what it is. I really didn't like the villains of the episode. These weird animate cloth monsters. You kind of got an interesting visual image when it kind of took the visual shape, the silhouette of a human being or a humanoid creature towards the end of the story when it was talking to the Doctor, but even then it felt rather weak. Last week's episode, whilst I didn't like the design of Tim Shaw, and I still think he looked more like a villain from Class than anything else, I liked the fact that it was a practical effect, that it was a guy in a costume. And you probably could do this whole effect with practical effects, with stop motion, or just with wire effects. Maybe it'd look a little bit ropey, no pun intended, if they were doing it with wire effects in the modern era, but my god, we got a similar kind of effect in the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and it was effective then. Here, not so much. For whatever reason, all the science fiction, the special effects within modern Doctor Who, the CGI effects, they always seem to have this kind of glossy look to them, which, bearing in mind this is supposed to be cloth, doesn't really work for it. I really don't know why that is, but aside from that, it's an episode where certain stuff got set up, like you had the whole thing of, oh, the water on this planet is dangerous, it'll kill you, and then nothing happened with that. Maybe it's a hangover from another era that I was expecting the Grumpy McGrumpy Pants to fall in the water and get eaten, or the woman from Albert, or Evil Businessman, but that didn't happen. Of course, if it did happen in previous series, it would have been the person falling in the water and dying, and the Doctor just looking down at them like, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Thankfully, of course, we didn't get that, but what we got instead of it was an episode which was fun for the most part, even if it felt a little bit pointless in a way. I enjoyed it as a whole, but I think that this isn't going to be an episode which I'll regard as one of the best of this series. But anyway, enough waffling about the story and stuff. Let us dive headfirst into the performance section, where I feel I have a little bit more to talk about. Oh dear. Okay, so now we're in the performance section where I talk about the performances within this week's episode of Doctor Who. Really is that easy? Really is that simple? Oh my god, I really am starting to fade back into my radio patter. Oh, good grief. But anyway, the performance side of things. As I said towards the start of this week's video, I am really sold on the idea of Jodie Whittaker being the Doctor. Far more sold than I was last week. Might take another week before I'm 100% sold, but yeah, actually seeing her as the Doctor and not manic, weird, strange Doctor is a massive improvement for me. I really don't like the manic post-regeneration thing in Doctor Who. I know a lot of people like it, and for a lot of people it's a thing. It's a thing that needs to be in the show, but for me, yeah, no, I'll quite happily do without that. I'd rather that the first episode with a new Doctor was the first episode with a new Doctor and not them being manic, weird, and this strange other personality. But for what we got of her this week, she was fine. Perfectly fine. I enjoyed her take on it. And again, we had more lines from her which felt like something I would say. Which, yeah, she's really, really what I'm really enjoying her. As for everybody else, well, I'm really not sold on the TARDIS crew dynamic. I think that at worst it ends up making what is usually a, for want of a better word, a superhero show into more of an ensemble, where most of the ensemble, quite frankly, this is going to be controversial, but I don't think it's that good. Beyond the dynamic between Graham and Ryan not feeling for me like it properly lands, you got the fact that the actor playing Ryan, his accent just feels so forced that it's hard to really connect with him on any real level, which is a shame because I know for a lot of people he really clicks with them. A lot of people with dyspraxia are really behind the idea of having him as a character, and you know what, if you're that kind of person, my hat goes off to you. I'm really happy you got someone that you can identify with, but simply from a performative side of view, he kind of feels a little bit wooden in some parts. Maybe he'll improve, I really don't know. I think Bradley Walsh is trying to do the best he possibly can, but it feels like a kind of character that really bounces well off other characters to make himself relevant and to make himself feel genuinely likeable and enjoyable. But he isn't really doing that. This episode started off with the Doctor and Yaz on one spaceship and Graham and Ryan on another. That suggested to me that you would get more of an interaction between these two pairings rather than the whole set of characters, which didn't happen. And even when they were reunited, it was back to mostly Graham and Ryan. Oh, and the Doctor and Yaz are there. Yeah, I really don't like that. And of course, as far as Yaz herself is concerned, I enjoy her performatively, but as a companion, I worry that she's going to become the next Nessa. That she's just going to become a character who was written into the programme to make a TARDIS crew, but is never really utilised to any great degree. I mean, for goodness sake, it's a police officer in a time-space travelling police call box. Something can be done with that. Something fun, something exciting, something interesting, and thus far, nothing. Granted, only 2 episodes into it, but I hope that she starts to do something more interesting and compelling soon, because otherwise her contribution to her time being a companion on Doctor Who isn't really going to be that much. Which is a shame because the actor playing her is doing a damn fine enough job. I just think that she really needs to do more. As for the other characters within the episode, they are perfectly serviceable. I think that Grumpy McGrumpy Pants was fine for what it is, or what he was, and that his character moment where he explains why he's so grumpy, I respect the fact that they bothered with it. I respect the fact that they decided to try and justify his character being a dick, but there was a moment of it which just kind of felt like it was driving the nail on the head. I would have been perfectly fine by that same token had he just been an arsehole, just because he's an arsehole and he didn't have a tragic backstory to him. Same with the woman with Alba. There was a part with her where I felt that when she was telling everybody about her tragic backstory, that it was all going to be a con, it was all going to be part of some kind of hustle that she was doing, that when we get towards the end of the episode we find out that she is actually the evil one. She's the bad guy of the story that's going to try and take the final treasure for herself, but she didn't. She was pretty much as she was depicted, which is fine because she was a fine enough character. As for evil businessman, he did the role perfectly fine. I am happy that he wasn't the evil mastermind who created all these killer monsters and stuff, because, yeah, I could really do without the I'm going to put these people on this planet and see how my monsters do against them. I shall create the ultimate life form. I'm glad we didn't get that. He was just an arsehole who was manipulating people for his own personal entertainment. The Doctor didn't make a big speech at the end of the episode telling him how much of a wanker he was. He just got away kind of scot-free in the end. Which is something that here and now I'm kind of fine with. The Doctor crash-landed into someone else's story, and now everybody leaves off to go and do whatever, with a brand new TARDIS, which I'll discuss a little bit more in the overview. Speaking of which, let us now dive headfirst into the overview! Woo! And now the overview. My overall feelings on the episode itself. Did I love it? Did I hate it? I thought it was perfectly fine. A serviceable episode of Doctor Who. Not as good as last week's episode of Doctor Who, but you know what? I enjoyed it. I really, really loved the new intro sequence. It was brilliant. I loved it. I'm going to feel like such a twat when I end up doing my own intro sequence, the new intro sequence for the Timeshift, because I was trying to go for a similar kind of thing. Maybe not quite as spectacular and well made, but I was going to try and do a slightly more retro-y looking thing for it, but you know what, whatever. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I am curious where they're going to take the timeless child bit. I am reluctant and slightly apprehensive about it. I know it's not going to be Susan, I know it's not going to be the Valiard, I know it's not going to be the Rani, so it's probably going to be the Doctor or some other character that we've not been introduced to as yet, but you know, that's acceptable. That's acceptable, I suppose, if we're going to have season-long mysteries. But we'll see. I am confident that Chris Jimbal will produce something that will get us talking, positively or negatively. And on that note, of course, we have the new TARDIS interior, which I need time to digest it, really. I was never keen on the whole coral-looking TARDIS from the Russell T Davies era. It never landed with me. It always felt a little bit too alien to me. It never really had kind of the same appeal to it as the classic Doctor Who TARDISes had, and more recent TARDISes have had. Though with that said, the interior is the TARDIS's generation of what they think the Doctor will end up liking. So if you look at it from that point of view, an alien machine trying to consider and try and understand what a humanoid life form would like in terms of a driving compartment, sure it works, but aside from everything of that, it's fine enough. I need more time to warm to it. It may just become a case that this is just the TARDIS interior they'll have for now, and maybe in a series or so time it'll change, or it might change for the next Doctor, but we'll soon see about that. Okay, now the comment section, where I read a comment that I received on last week's video. If you want me to read out your comment next week, or have me respond directly to you, then just leave a comment in whichever website you're watching this on. Either on YouTube, or at this point, probably Rooster Teeth, as most of the other forums I used to post this stuff on have now all been shut down. But anyway, let us read this comment from iMac of Death on Rooster Teeth. Controversial opinion, but I don't like this new Doctor. Call me misogynist, but I just can't see a woman playing the role that has been, since the first season, a male role all that well. The slow writing in the series also makes it seem as though it should be an impossible transformation. So there's also that. A break in tradition and the law, to what ends? Well, iMac of Death, I don't want to make it sound as if I'm speaking for you, but I feel that you're not a misogynist. You're just kind of more concerned about the casting of Jodie Whittaker more from a mechanical point of view than necessarily being a I hate women kind of point of view. But again, I don't want to make it sound as if I'm speaking for you. To kind of go through the comment in reverse, to what ends? Well, I think that this is probably the more controversial opinion. I genuinely think that the only reason why there is a female Doctor is because the ratings for the show for the past few series were so shockingly low. I've got some of them written down in front of me, and if you want to check them out yourself, just go onto Google or whatever search engine you want to use and just type Doctor Who season, then type whichever season number you want, viewing figures. It is an almighty shower of depression. I honestly think that, again, the only reason we have Jodie Whittaker is because they needed to do something to really kickstart this series again, to really get people talking about and watching the show again. And if you look at some of the things that have been said, both on Twitter, on YouTube, on social media, yeah, a lot of people are talking about it. Some positive, some negative, but you know what, in this day and age, seemingly all press is good press, good or bad. So yeah, that's why they're doing it. It's purely and simply down to the viewing figures. I know that's an incredibly cynical way in looking at it, but let's be honest, I really don't think the BBC, after all these years, has suddenly turned around and said, hey, let's be more progressive, let's be more diverse, let's embrace political correctness, because I really don't think that's going to be the case for them, given the casting roles and the different things they've been doing over the years, but that's a whole other discussion. Of course, if you're going to look at it from a lore point of view, during the Stephen Moffat era, particularly the Peter Capaldi era, the show practically bent over backwards to say, Time Lords can regenerate into the opposite sex. They did it time and time again, sometimes hinted, sometimes visually there for you to see on screen, which I feel, again, is less of a this girl can progressive up feminism kind of way, and more of a Stephen Moffat wanting people to congratulate him for being so thought-provoking and progressive, and so that later down the line he could be the showrunner to introduce a female Doctor and have people clapping him and telling him how great he is. That may seem a little bit more like a character assassination than I really do for Stephen Moffat, but maybe I'll save that for when we cut to the Stephen Moffat retrospective. With a show like Doctor Who, the thing that you got to bear in mind about it beyond anything else is that at this point it's been going nearly 60 years, so you're always going to get changes to the lore, to the background material. That's just the way it's going to be. Sometimes you're going to get contradictory information, sometimes you're going to get new information, sometimes the rule book is going to get completely thrown out the window, and it all comes down to the quality of the writer on the showrunner at the time. But yeah, again, to just summarise, and I don't want to sound as if I'm bashing Christian Ball, Jodie Whittaker. I genuinely just think it was down to viewing figures more than anything else. I would like to think that it was to be progressive, to be politically correct, or to just do the good thing and to try and open the point of view as to how many people could be the Doctor. But yeah, I really struggle to believe that this was anything other than just a cold, calculated move, but thank you for the comment. I hope that my comment meets your expectations, and I hope to hear more from you, and anybody else for that matter. If you loved this episode of Doctor Who, let me know in the comment section down below. Whether you liked it, hated it, loved it, despised it, let me know, and I'll either get back to you directly in the comment section, or I'll read you out towards the end of next week's episode of the Timeshift. Hopefully the video is working next week, but we'll soon find out. Thank you for watching, and goodbye!